on the back end of that, where they're growing grapes in Great Britain and making wine in an area that's never seen it before. And you go back and you look at the history, and the one connection is always that it's changing continually.
Right.
Oh, it is continually. But Vikings settled Greenland between 800 and 900 AD. When Greenland warmed up, we had a global warming cycle, as I said, 1,000 and 1,200 years ago. That was warmer than the current one. So the Vikings settled Greenland. But then they had to leave about 1100 AD when it started to get too cold again. Because our warmest cycles come about every 1,200 years, our warmest of the warmest cycles. So they had to leave, and then our global warming cycles weren't quite as warm until this past one. This is all normal cycles, all normal cycles.
All right, you all hold on. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, there'll be more of Mind Your Own Business Radio on News Talk WLOB. Stay tuned for more of Mind Your Own Business right here on News Talk WLOB, 1310 AM and WLOBradio.com.
Mind your own business.
Now, where did I put my keys?
Spending too much time and energy searching for your things?
I know my cell phone is around here somewhere.
Clutter getting in your way?
I can't believe that I'm going to be late again. Something has to change.
Do you own your stuff, or does your stuff own you?
Go to allinplaceservices.com and get your free gift, The 9 Strategies of Reasonably Organized People. And as a bonus, get weekly tips and solutions on how to simplify your life. Browse a bit and let us help you get it together.
At highway speeds, the average text takes your eyes off the road for about 5 seconds. That's enough time to travel the length of a football field. Stop texts, stopwrecks.org. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Mind Your Own Business Radio. Welcome back to Mind Your Own Business Radio on News Talk WLOB. I'm Debbie Davis, and you are?
Tom Sarna.
And with us is David Dilley. He is the president, founder, and chief research scientist of Global Weather Oscillations. Welcome back.
Thank you very much.
We're talking about the weather on a Sunday.
We certainly are. David, what kind of cycle are we in right now, and how is it in relation to the prior cycle? You know what I mean? Lead me up into that.
Okay, what we'll do is first we'll take a trek back 500,000 years.
Okay, let's do that.
500,000 years ago, what happens is every 116,000 years, about, the Earth swings out further away from the sun. When that happens, we have weaker sunshine.
Right.
This happens about every 116,000 years. Okay. When this happens, we go into a glacial period every 116,000 years. A glacial period will last maybe 40,000 years. And what we'll have is a mile-thick coverage of ice year-round from about New York City northward. Year-round. Because of that, you don't have any plant life. Because you don't have any plant life, you don't have photosynthesis. The plants are not taking carbon dioxide out of the air. And also, you don't have vegetation that's rotting and other things giving off carbon dioxide. So a combination of it all is every 116,000 years, you have a glacial period, carbon dioxide, because of the cold air, the oceans cool off. Carbon dioxide is all absorbed into the oceans, and there's less carbon dioxide put into the atmosphere, so you have a huge drop in the carbon dioxide every 116,000 years with the temperature.
So carbon dioxide is absorbed into the ocean? Absorbed into the ocean.
Colder oceans absorb the carbon dioxide.
Okay.
And then it kind of sinks. This is, in science, we call it a sink. It sinks into the oceans. It's stored for 70, 80,000 years. Stored.
Really?
Waiting to come back. Meanwhile, all the ice-covered land, New York City northward, is covering up the ground matter, storing carbon dioxide also. It can't escape into the atmosphere.
Sure.
Combination number 2, carbon dioxide will drop from 400 parts per million down to about 160 parts per million during an ice age.
During an ice age, okay.
And with all that white space on the planet, the sun's rays are going to be absorbed in a different manner, because white's going to reflect, and a darker surface is going to absorb.
Well, that's correct also. All the ice cover, New York City, Northwood, will actually reflect sunlight, so it's not absorbed and doesn't warm up the planet. But here I was talking about the carbon dioxide being trapped under the ice and in the oceans, oceans absorbing it all and kind of banking it for the future.
So the levels are low when it's cold.
So the levels are very low every 116,000 years. Then all of a sudden, we swing in closer to the sun, and there's special gravitational cycles also with the Earth, Moon, Sun. They interact, and all of a sudden, we come out of the Ice Age rapidly. During the course of 10,000 years, the temperatures will rise rapidly. All the ice and snow, New York City, Northwood, melts, and the temperatures rise rapidly. Carbon dioxide goes up, follows the temperature rise by about 800 years, somewhere in there, 600 to 800 years. Remember, I said carbon dioxide was stored in the ocean. As the oceans warm up, as we're warming up, all of a sudden it gives up the carbon dioxide again. That stored carbon dioxide goes up into the atmosphere. As the ice retreats from New York City northward, all of a sudden, bare ground, we have nice carbon dioxide again available in the soil to be released into the atmosphere. Combination of the two, all of a sudden, we have a rapid rise in carbon dioxide. So during the course of 10,000 years, we came out of a ice age back about 15,000 years ago. We had a rapid rise in temperature. Carbon dioxide, 600 to 800 years later, followed the rise. This is known science, proven science.
Okay.
And then, about 7,000 years ago, we had our 116,000 year peak in temperature. This is when we were warmest, about 7,000 years ago.
Okay.
We're now sliding down towards an ice age that will begin about 40,000 years. But anyway, we came off the peak of the warm period about 7,000 years ago. To prove that point is 7,000 years ago, we had 50% less ice in the Arctic than we have today. 50% less ice.
How do we know that?
There was this came out a couple of years ago where some people were doing cleanup of beaches and land areas up in the Arctic, and they could see where the ice had retreated 7,000 years ago.
Oh, I see.
And then it covered up again.
Right.
And then it's retreated again a little bit. But we had 50% less ice back 7,000 years ago. So anyway, we peaked. Our temperature peaked 7,000 years ago. But when we look at these 116,000 year cycles, there's 5 of them going back past 500,000 years, what we see is the carbon dioxide peaks anywhere from 2,000 to 7,000 years after the temperature peak. So the temperatures peaked 7,000 years ago, and what's today? 7,000 years later. This is when the carbon dioxide is naturally peaking. We are supposed to have very high carbon dioxide now, and it's very good for the climates. Yeah. The plant life loves it.
Well, yeah, that's what they take in.
They take in the carbon dioxide, and what is the waste product?
Let me say oxygen.
Oxygen, which is very great. The Earth needs high carbon dioxide levels every 116,000 years. It's part of a natural cycle.
Sure. All right, I get it. So to have high carbon dioxide levels is not bad, but yet that's not the common thought out there.
Not the common thought, because what they do is they only go back the past 100 years and they say, oh, this and that has changed during the past 100 years, and we're hurting the climate.
Well, and coincidentally, carbon dioxide exists in some things that are man-made, so it's easy for them to make the connection to say, oh, it's not a natural cycle. Man's contributing to this.
Well, that's true too. They try to do that. Carbon dioxide has risen naturally from 1860, the beginning of the industrial age. It was about 260, 70 parts per million back around 1860. Then it rose up to now it's 400 parts per million. That's a rise of 140 parts. This is what alarmed everyone. They're saying, wow. However, when you look at it, the amount of the industrial carbon dioxide by burning fossil fuels is only 5% of the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And carbon dioxide is a very minor greenhouse gas. Greenhouses, when you hear of a greenhouse, you go in a greenhouse and kind of keeps the plants warm because you have glass over it. It's controlled. Right. So we have a couple greenhouse gases. And greenhouse gases are only 1% of the atmosphere. And this 1% of the atmosphere that's a greenhouse gas, almost all of it is water vapor. Water vapor is 96% of the greenhouse gas. Carbon dioxide is only 4% of the greenhouse gas, 2 to 4%. Of that 2 to 4%, the man-made fossil fuel burning carbon dioxide is probably only about 0.5% of the carbon dioxide.
Well, if this is common knowledge, I mean, in your field, why aren't the little people getting this information?
Well, it's not covered in the press. There's been censorship for 15 years on what will be printed in scientific journals.
Really?
Through the grant system, where they'll only give certain grants. Yeah. There's censorship on some organizations won't let people like me speak. Mm-hmm. They don't want to hear about it because there's so much money tied up in the avenues on what we call the green energy side of the issue right now. There's so much money tied up in there. They don't want anyone to know that we're in a natural cycle because this will upset their apple cart.
Is there anyone funding your research?
Not at all. I actually had a talk that was canceled out back in June. I won't mention what on it, but it was canceled out, and partially because there was a university that said that I was funded by large oil, and which is 100% untrue. I've never received a dime from any energy company at all. My research is through my own company. We're self-funded. And like I said, we're not tied to any energy at all. All we're trying to do is get the proof out. Because the cycles that I use, the research that I do, I use in my products in my company. And the research is done for my company, and we're not funded by anyone else to do it.
Well, I don't even know if you'll know the answer to this, but I mean, if there's all kinds of funding to prove humans are all to fault, is there any funding on the other side anywhere for truth?
Very little.
Very little.
There is some funding on the natural cycles, because they are doing natural cycles, but the outcome is not to say it was...
They don't want to connect the dots.
No, they don't want to connect the dots on it. So most of it's more for carbon dioxide and other type of funding, and also for biology to try to show that we're harming the oceans, we're harming ecological everything. And like on coral reefs, they'll say, well, the coral reefs and the oceans are becoming more acidic, and coral reefs are starting to die off a little bit. Yeah. But they only cite research going back past 80 to 100,000 years. Well, we had peaked out on our last warming cycle 116,000 years. You notice they don't include that because it happened then too.
Did it really? The oceans were acidic then?
Every 116,000 years, what I just mentioned would happen. But they don't want you to know about it, so they won't mention it. They will only go back to just prior to that time period. It's like when they have a speaker come out and talk about, well, the past 100 years, they'll only go back to 1950 or something like that, because they don't want you to know it was very warm in the 1930s.
Well, what's so frustrating about watching this take place from the sidelines is that whole process goes directly against the basics of how science is arrived at and looked at. Scientists, by nature, are supposed to look at both sides, look at all the data, and then come up with the correct answer based on that data. You know, disprove the hypothesis is always the goal, but half of the data is missing from the equation.
That's a real good question here, because I wasn't going to hit on this, but now you just